Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here with another Master Duel video. Today we're going to be taking a look at some Swordsoul Tenyi gameplay here from the start of Season 7. At the time I'm recording this, it is still just the first few hours of the season, and we've already gotten quite a few good matches in with good old Swordsoul Tenyi here to showcase for you today. So my plan right now is to climb with this deck all the way to, through the rest of Platinum, all the way up to Diamond 5, and then from there, you know, like I talked about rather in the last video. I was gonna say like I just talked about because I just recorded the last Tri-Zoo gameplay video, but no, like I talked about in the last video rather. And once I get up to Diamond, I think this time instead of just only showcasing other decks once I get to Diamond 1, I'll just start showcasing other decks, you know, once I get to Diamond, and then maybe as we get closer to the climb, like then we'll lean a bit back more into Tri-Zoo or Swordsoul, or we're just kind of working them in. I don't know, like usually I go by such a rigid, like I play this deck around this time, and then I play this deck around this time of the season, and then this deck, you know what I mean? But I think this season I'm just going to be try to be a little bit more loose with it, and be a little bit more open to climbing just with other decks in general. But I do kind of want to get to at least Diamond first before I start doing that, so it'll probably be Swordsoul Tenyi for the vast majority, if not all of the rest of the climb through up through Platinum to Diamond there. So we are still rocking the same build that we showcased at the beginning of the season, which is still the same build that we used to climb at the beginning of last season. I do feel that this list is relatively optimized for climbing ladder in particular. It's not doing anything too fancy. There aren't too many like cute techs. We're not using stuff like Shathana or Heavenly Dragon Circle, which none of those cards are bad by any means, but we're just doing a relatively by the books build. Even the number of cards in our deck, which is still above 40 at 41, is still not as adventurous as a lot of people like to get with their builds. But I tend to be a bit more about like you know, safer, consistent builds as opposed to ones that are more out there with more variety of like tech options, I guess you could say. So yeah, let's go ahead and run through the list card by card here as we always do, and then I have some games for us to take a look at. So we have one Effect Failure, one Deskbot 001, 3 Tenyi Spirit Adhara, 3 Maxx, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 3 Swordsoul of Mo Ye, 2 Swordsoul of Taia, 2 Incredible Ecclesia, the Virtuous, 3 Swordsoul Strategist Longyuan, 2 Tenyi Spirit Vishuda, 3 Tenyi Spirit Ashuna, 1 Nibiru, the Primal Being, 1 Archnemesis Protos, 2 Vessel for the Dragon Cycle, 3 Swordsoul Emergence, 2 Call by the Grave, 3 Crossout Exterminator, 2 Infinite Impermanence, and 1 Swordsoul Blackout. Down here in the extra deck we have 1 Yazi, Evil of the Yang Zing, 2 Baxia, Brightness of the Yang Zing, 1 Borload, Savage Dragon, 1 Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, 2 Swordsoul Grandmaster Chi Xiao, 1 Chao Fang, Phantom of the Yang Zing, 1 Baron de Fleur, 1 Swordsoul Supreme Sovereign Cheng Ying, 2 Monk of the Tenyi, 1 Crystron Halqifibrax, 1 Shaman of the Tenyi, and then finally 1 Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon. So I'm very much still in particular liking 3 Crossout Exterminator in the build. I know that I've said in the past that, oh, if I'll drop down to 2 copies, especially if Swordsoul Tenyi just kind of starts to level out and then other decks start to see more play, but nope, as this season begins, we are seeing the meta shift even more into Swordsoul Tenyi as it continues to dominate more and more. Like the level it's at right now is where Tri-Zoo was at its most dominant ever, during the whole what was it, pretty much like 4.5 months, 4.5 seasons. No, actually 5 and some change seasons before Swordsoul came out. You know, only for a couple of weeks during that time did we see Tri-Zoo as dominant in the meta as Swordsoul Tenyi is now, and Swordsoul Tenyi's position has been just gradually leading up to this point, and honestly, I don't think it's going to level out here. I think Swordsoul Tenyi is just going to continue to become more and more dominant, probably until just the Adventure and Flow packs comes out, which I do think is going to be soon. There's actually a good chance it's been announced by the time this video is released, if I had to guess, but yeah, I definitely think that's, and I think that's kind of why this format to a lot of people, to an extent myself included, but not to such a degree, but yeah, to some people this format's felt a little bit more stale, and I can see where they're coming from, and I think it's because Swordsoul Tenyi is just like more far and away the best deck than Tri-Zoo was. Like I feel like other decks stood more of a chance against Tri-Zoo than they tend to stand against Swordsoul Tenyi. But of course, that's also why we're using the deck, right? Because it's such a dominant tier 1 deck. Just kind of too good to pass up in that regard. But again, just sorry, I touched that wheel back to my main point. That's why I'm still liking 3 Crossout Designator in the build as opposed to 2, which I tend to use in most decks. But this deck is resilient, is a little bit like more resilient to hand traps than other decks that play 3 Crossout Designator. But because Swordsoul Tenyi is so dominant in the meta, because it's everywhere, this card really is, in the mirror match, like a quick play spell version of Solemn Judgment. So being able to have 3 copies of that to shut out whatever the opponent is doing is very, very nice. Still like 2 Imperms plus the Veiler for that one, or for that same reason. And I like the 1 Veiler in addition to the Imperms also for Crossout Designator, because you might be playing against like Sky Striker or Neuron or just another deck that's teching Veiler in general. So having the option to cross it out is always very good. Yeah, the build is otherwise, like I said, the same, unchanged for excuse me, quite a while now. So yeah, let's go ahead and just jump into some gameplay. Okay, so this first game is going to be against quite an interesting deck. It's I think it's a pure, or like a pretty close to pure P.U.N.K deck. Excuse me, sorry about that. Yeah, still allergy season where I'm at for me, but yeah, so I guess it's a P.U.N.K deck. It's pretty much, P.U.N.K is like the only real archetype it's playing, or that I saw on the list there, and then otherwise it had just a bunch of like engine cards for like an Auroradon engine, and then like a Nemesis Corridor into Thunder Dragon Colossus kind of little package as well. But in any case, we take the first turn here. I'm going to lead by specialing the Adhara before I Emergence for Mo Ye here. I actually debated quite a bit on this opening line when I opened this hand, but I decided that specialing the Adhara first was the right thing to do, even if I didn't think there's a chance I wasn't going to use it, which I actually don't really end up using it for this particular combo line. But then I was trying to figure out, like, okay, do I want to go for like a Hulk, you know, Auroradon line? Do I want to try to summon this? Do I send this for a Monk and then summon the Taia and try to combo off that way? Do I want to save this Emergence? Do I want to just use it for a Mo Ye now? I ultimately decided that using it for Mo Ye now was the best way to use it, because that's the line that would get me the most advantage up front, and then also, even if it gets negated, we can especially Adhara, have the option of wheel into a Hulk line, and then if things go totally south, we at least still have the Taia in hand for next turn, and then having the Nibiru and Imperm for disruption would help us get to that next turn as well. So ultimately decided to just use the Emergence for Mo Ye, summon that goes through, so we'll go ahead and get the Chi Shao to get our draw plus search. Again, another reason I like this line is because it gets us a decent bit of advantage, and we very luckily draw the Archnemesis Protos, which was the main incentive to save the Emergence, was to try to maybe search the Protos later to summon, but whatever, we're the luckiest player in the world, and we just drew it anyway, so we don't have to worry about that. So indeed, we'll go ahead and get the Longyuan off of the Chi Shao, set up a Baron, deal a little bit of burn damage to our opponent, and then we'll summon the Protos, banishing our 3 monsters in grave, call Dark, and set the Imperm before passing. So Dark seemed like it kind of randomly ended up being a really good attribute to call against this particular opponent. They're still able to do quite a few things. Actually, at first I thought they were Sky Striker because of this little maneuver here. And then I was like, oh wait, Sky Striker attacking a P.U.N.K engine, question mark? But then a little bit later it kind of becomes apparent, no, this is like P.U.N.K that attacks a little Sky Striker package. But no, yeah, so calling Dark does not completely shut them out, but it does shut them out of a couple of key cards I noticed just looking at their deck before this replay, right? Oh, by the way, I didn't negate the Widow Anchor there because there was no real point, obviously, to negating the Widow Anchor with Baron, and if I choose not to negate it and the Baron lives, then I can use the Omni-Negate effect during the next turn. So that also applies, obviously, if your opponent's targeting it with, like, Imperm or something. If your opponent's just going to negate the Baron, don't use your Omni-Negate to stop that, because that's pointless. And again, if your Baron lives until the next turn, then cool, then you can use the Omni-Negate later. So, but okay, the long and short of what I'm saying about calling Dark here, it seems like it's mainly going to stop them from going into like Hyper Librarian, Thunder Dragon Colossus, and maybe a couple of other random extra deck monsters, but mainly the Hyper Librarian, which is obviously going to shut them out of a lot of advantage. So I don't know what their hand is like. I don't know really how their deck combos extensively. Oh, and here I make a very poor decision. to imperm this Deskbot 003. I don't know why. I should have realized they had a tuner and a non-tuner. They could have just gone into a Hulk, and I should have saved the imperm for that, but whatever. I did what I did. I impermed the Deskbot 003, but I don't think that was a good call to do that there. Yeah, no, in any case, so yeah, even though Dark doesn't completely lock them out of their plays as a whole, it's going to stop them from, mainly it seems like their Hyper Librarian. And again, I don't know exactly how, if they would have been able to go into a Hyper Librarian with the kind of hand they had anyway, but or if they, how much they had to like play around that in that regard. But at the very least, it does seem to have forced them to alter their plays at least somewhat, and that's good enough for me. Because like here, they just go for the big Deskbot and then battle, and they just kind of go into main phase 2, and it's like, oh, they must really not have had anything. So at this point, again, not really knowing what my opponent's playing at all, and definitely not knowing their list, I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, calling Dark definitely seems to have affected their line here. Like, they're clearly going for a weird line because they were not able to, you know, summon Dark monsters. So that's still going to be my plan here, is to just call Dark during their next turn, which is also why I haven't Nibiru'd up to this point. Because the Protos and the Baron that are on my board are very much still live. Well, the Baron's getting destroyed, so it's not the case with the Baron anymore, but the Protos to me is very much a live asset, and I don't want to get rid of it, because again, it just seems to have very much affected how my opponent played this turn out. So I top deck a Vishuda, not really going to do anything. So I'll go ahead and Protos and call Dark again here. Now, I really was tempted to call Wind, because their deck did seem to be fairly Wind focused, but again, I just wasn't very sure of what they were playing overall. Like, I couldn't be 100% certain of it. And again, from what I observed, it seemed like, especially the way they played that Hulk Rorodon line, from my standpoint at this point in the game, I'm thinking like, okay, they clearly did not do their full line. Like, there's no way what they did was their optimal play. And it's gotta be because they couldn't summon Dark monsters. So I think even though I could call Wind, pop the Rorodon here, and also shut off Wind, which did seem to be a good part of their... I think the parts of the engine they have left in their extra deck are likely to be Dark, so I'm just going to call Dark again, continue to shut them off from that. They've already exhausted the awkward plays they can do, and then we'll just keep going from there. So that's... I just want to give an insight into what I was thinking of why I'm making the decisions I make, because I see a lot of people say that's like one of the things they appreciate about my content, and I mean, the reason I do it is because that's what I wanted to see in other, like, gameplay content, right? I don't know, the reason I make the videos the way I do in pretty much every regard is just like, okay, I wanna make the kind of videos that I'm always looking for when I'm looking for, you know, deck gameplay, or a deck profile, or like a combo guide, or gameplay tips, anything like that. So they do knock me down to 2,700 here after bouncing the Protos, but I'm not super concerned about it. They have another back row. I'm going to go ahead and lead with the Vishuda and go into the Monk. This will not only set up the Hulk line with the Rorodon, but I also want to use the Vishuda to bounce this new back row they set. Well, I was going to just target this one anyway, even though they just flipped up the Called By here, and that's because they didn't use this last turn at all, so I figured this would be the more life threat. Now, I can't special the Adhara here, but I can still normal, and I didn't have anything I was going to normal summon otherwise in hand anyway, so definitely not that big of a deal. Now, like I mentioned, we can go into the Hulky Fibrax line, our own Hulky Fibrax line. Our opponent definitely did theirs. Now it's our turn. We'll go ahead and search out the Deskbot, go into the Rorodon. You know how it goes from here. We summon the tokens, summon the Rorodon, sync into Yazi. Because our opponent has stuff to pop, we can just use Yazi to pop itself, and I'll just go ahead and pop their big synchro here. They get their Deskbot back as well, but whatever, I don't care about that at all. Yeah, I'll just pop my Yazi, pop their big P.U.N.K monster, summon a Taia, use that to set up the Baxia. We can use the Baxia to put back the Aurora on the Deskbot, and then we can get the Mo Ye, and then we can go into the Longyuan, and then by that point we definitely have game. And our opponent realizes that as I summon the Taia here, they just end up conceding at this point. Yep. And we also still had the Protos in our hand on top of that, and we had that Nibiru the whole time, didn't even have to use it. Again, I didn't use it because I thought that saving the Protos was the better call. That seemed to be shutting them down more than the Nibiru possibly would have. So, well, not possibly, but more than the Nibiru would have. And the Protos obviously being a recurring means of shutting them down, whereas Nibiru is a one-time thing that would also get rid of the Protos. So, yeah, all right, let's go ahead and take a look at the next game here. So this one is going to be against a burn deck. It's funny how when I was playing Trizu, I played against just like all meta decks, and then it seemed like once I switched over to Swordsoul Tenyi, then I started kind of getting the more odd matchups. But no, we definitely don't mind that. Just being the meta bully, I suppose. So I go first here, but I'm looking at my goings for, I go second here, but I'm looking at my goings second hand thinking like, wow, I'm definitely glad I didn't go first with this hand. You know, I have the C and the Ash to counter my opponent's plays, and if I can just draw a Tenyi monster, then I'm in like perfect, amazing shape here. But then, of course, our opponent flips the Lord of the Heavenly Prison and sets 3 and passes. So I'm immediately thinking Eldritch. Like I said, it actually ended up being Burn, but obviously seeing this, I'm going to assume my opponent is playing Eldritch because it's the most likely thing for them to be playing. Could also be like Trap Tricks or just another stun deck in general, but Eldritch is definitely the most common among them. So it's like, oh great, now I have to play against Eldritch, and I already don't have that much gas anyway. So we do draw a Longyuan here, which does not really do anything for us. So we just have to set Call by and Designator, and then pass back to our opponent. Yep, at this point they reveal the Lord of the Heavenly Prison again, and then just set a back row and then pass back to us. So I'm thinking like, okay, well, it seems like it's Eldritch, but at least they don't have like their Golden Lord online, this is a good example of why Eldritch is like, I think, just far and away the best stun deck right now. Is that, and I've talked about this before with Eldritch in particular, but if stun decks only have floodgates but don't have literally any kind of monsters or other threat to back them up, then they're actually relatively harmless. Because yeah, you can't do your plays, but you can just summon any one of your like combo pieces and just kind of like beat them down with it, right? It's the Golden Lord on top of the floodgates that really solidifies Eldritch as such a scary deck, like a continuously recurring, sometimes indestructible, sometimes removing your own, like removing your opponent's things, big bodied threat. Yeah, again, it's the Golden Lord plus the floodgates that really make up how that deck shines. And yeah, Lord of the Heavenly Prison does kind of like include a big threat for back row race decks in general, but definitely not on the level that Eldritch is at. So I do top deck a Mo Ye here, so at least I have something, you know, I have some kind of semblance of plays here. Opponent then flips up Trap Trick, and then sets a Gravedigger's Trap Hole. So this is kind of what makes me think like, okay, maybe it's Trap Trick and not Eldritch, because I definitely don't think those are options that Eldritch would pretty much ever play. I'm going to go ahead and use the Vessel here as long as I've got the Swordsoul token out. I want to send the Vishuda and bounce this back row, because I already know this is a Gravedigger's Trap Hole, which we'll get to, you know, flip at some point this turn, but since I know what it is, it's a lot easier for me to play around it. I want to start taking care of the back rows that are not getting played around. And I did not pay attention at all when I was actually playing the game, or now watching this replay, to what order my opponent set stuff, in contrary to the last video where I talked about how important it was to watch for that and showed an example of where it was important. So I'm just going to go ahead and target one at random here, more or less, and return it to the hand there. Yep, at this point I'll use Longyuan to draw out the Gravedigger's Trap Hole. Like, I would like to have the Baron here for just the level 10 Synchro in general, but I think the advantage gained off of going into, like, Mo Ye, the Mo Ye into the Chi Xiao is going to be more important in the end. Because I feel like I can deal with my opponent's back row. It doesn't seem like they have anything too threatening face down. So I'd rather have the advantage here than, like, just try to get the negation, the, like, Omni Negate off. Plus, again, you know, kind of like talking about Protos and Nibiru, the advantage is going to be something that's going to, like, in the long term help me out, as opposed to the Omni Negate, which is a one-off thing. So my opponent has, what is this, Mahama the Fairy Dragon? Okay, yeah, they go ahead and summon that and deal the damage back to me, which scared me for a second. Obviously I have more than enough life points to survive. Oh, also we have the Blackout, so we can just use that to get rid of the opponent's back rows. Another reason I don't feel as threatened by them. But yeah, this Mahama definitely took me by surprise. I'd never heard of this card before in my life before it got played against me here, so it definitely startled me to take 2800 back, but not that big of a deal. So I know they have Lord of the Heavenly Prison and a back row bounce, as well as one unknown. In response to the Lord being flipped, I'll go ahead and use Blackout to take out their 2 face downs, because obviously I won't have another point to do it at this turn. The other reason to do it is because Lord of the Heavenly Prison, even though it's technically revealed right now, has not been resolved yet, so they won't get to summon it. From what I understand, I'm like reading the effect, I think that's how that works, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Anyway, they have card demise try to refuel, but we've held this Ash for long enough. It's about time we actually use it here, right? Oh, now here, during the end phase, right, I used Chi Xiao to banish the Blackout from the graveyard in order to summon a Swordsoul token. That looks a little weird. Like, why would you do it during the end phase? That's a pointless effect to negate. It's actually because I have the Vishuda in the graveyard. And, you know, bouncing this back row seemed to work out pretty well for me last turn. Opponent didn't have any other threats, and then, you know, from there, they weren't able to, or the other back rows weren't to stop me. By the way, if we take a look at what we destroyed here, we can definitely confirm it's a burn, right? Not only do they have the Just Desserts, but also Dimension Wall, which is kind of like Magic Cylinder, but just doesn't negate the attack. I don't know why you wouldn't just play Magic Cylinder, but yeah, they have the Dimension Wall here, so definitely glad I sent that away. And that's also, again, how I know 100% for sure that it's burned now. It also seems like the Gravedigger's Trap Hole is being utilized as a burn effect here, rather than just a negation, which is actually pretty smart. I didn't even really think about how this would boost the viability of burn decks in that regard, but yeah, to be fair, that's a very good point. Good on our opponent for using it in that way. But like I said, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and set up the Swordsoul token so I can bounce this back row before making any other plays with the Vishuda here. They'll end up chaining it as a Secret Blast to deal even more damage to me. I flipped Crossout Designator here because I thought for some reason it would go to the graveyard and would save me 300 damage. Not that it was going to cost me the game either way, but I don't know. Plus, I don't know, it didn't matter anyway. My opponent's playing face up completely at this point here, so I know they don't have anything that I need to Crossout Designator. Speaking of finally making use of hand traps like with the Ash, now we get to finally make use of this Maxx and get at least one draw for this Lord of the Heavenly Prison being summoned. Not that we need it, as we're holding one of each Swordsoul monster. They'll set an Extravagance, but it's going to ultimately not lead to anything. We drew another Crossout Designator anyway, so it didn't even really matter that we superfluously used our first one. And again, it didn't really matter in the first place anyway, because we're just going to very, very easily win on this turn anyway. Yeah, we don't even need to use Taia's effect, because we already have a token out. Let's go straight into the Baxia. Bounce back their monsters. Baron will pop the Extravagance just because I can, and then we'll just swing in for game. I mean, it's overkill at this point, but whatever. It is what it is. Just always nice to show, I guess, wins against back row heavy decks. Again, I don't know, it's funny how I just started playing against all the weird decks as soon as I switched to like the top meta deck, but again, if we're going to have to play the role of the bully, I guess we will have to. So, alright, let's go and look at the next game now. Okay, speaking of games where we bully people, we end up playing against Cyber Dragons, and we just, like, inadvertently, accidentally, completely just bullied this poor Cyber Dragon player just out of the game. So, I admit there is something a little satisfying about it, about just how thoroughly we did this, but it was still a little mean. I have to admit, so apologies, Alan Joe. I know you're just out here trying to have fun with Cybers, and I respect that because Cybers are a very cool deck. I've played Cybers in the TCG, although that was back like when the first structure that came out, but I know how much fun it is for Power Bond shenanigans. But yeah, so we're gonna have to open with the Ashuna plus Vishuda line because we don't really have any other plays. We do have a Taia, but I tend to use that more as a backup play, if possible. Plus, this line I knew would enable me to go into, like, Mo Ye, which let me get the extra draw, and also set up a Chao Feng as well, which is how we're going to end up, you know, bullying Cybers so badly. So since we draw an extra Crossout Designator, I can just go ahead and use that as the card I send with Baxia. Otherwise, I was going to have to send a Monk, but then I couldn't use Adhara's effect later, which wouldn't have been the end of the world. Still would have gone for a Chao Feng to shut off light effects here, but, yep, we get to use the Adhara, though, because we have an extra card to send anyway. And then we'll set the other Crossout Designator before passing. So, yeah, we've got the Chi Xiao, turned off light effects, we've got a Maxx. And then they summoned... Well, so, okay. This is another game where, like, kind of the pacing of how it played out live kind of told the story, right? They drew for turn, immediately normal summoned hers, right? And then there's just this pause for about like 45 seconds as nothing was happening. And I was like, oh no, they're reading Chao Feng and they're realizing like how screwed they are because every Cyber Dragon monster is light. So then after that pause, they activate the machine dupe here for a couple more Cyber Dragons. I'm going to use Maxx, obviously, because my opponent's about to summon a lot. They've got a Royal Finish call by. I'm very jealous of that. Very, very nice, Alan. But we do have the Crossout to take care of that call by there. So not only do they not get any light effects, but they're also under the restriction of Maxx. Well, kind of restriction. You know what I mean? They're under Maxx. And even if they do manage to summon a non-light monster to try to make plays, I mean, I've still got Chi Xiao to negate that as well. Now, there is also the note that Chao Feng only stops activated effects, right? So that's why hers is still treated as a Cyber Dragon. Chao Feng says your opponent cannot activate effects of monsters with the same original attribute as the Yang Zing monsters used to send, as material. So we sent Baxia as light, so they can't activate light effects, but continuous effects, like the one that is treating hers as Cyber Dragon, is not negated because it's not, again, not an activated effect. So that's why the machine dupe still got 2 regular Cyber Dragons that my opponent was able to use to go for Nova. But that Nova is really not going to be able to do much of anything because, again, they can't activate any of its effects. They've been moving to Almirage and battle over my monk, which is fine. I don't care about that. And then pass because I can't do anything. I'm so sorry. It's so mean. But I mean, I'm not sorry. Like, that's the thing, right? I'm not sorry because it's ranked ladder. At the end of the day, like, yeah, sometimes we end up just being straight up bullies, but that's kind of how it is sometimes. I don't know. It sounds really shitty when you say it like that. It sounds like something the bully would say, but I guess it's kind of the role you have to accept when you are using meta decks. So, alright, we've got one more game to take a look at. Let's jump right into it. Alright, this last game is going to be against a mirror match. So, finally a matchup where it's not quite, 100% bullying, no matter what really happens here. Interestingly, I was looking at my opponent's list, and they're only playing 1 Desires. They're also playing Feather Duster and Lightning Storm. So, seems like they're teching out against Eldritch quite a bit. But I don't know about the 1 Desires. It seems a little weird to me. But, yeah, unfortunately, we go second and do not open any kind of a hand trap or, quick disruption here. So opponent gets to go off pretty much unfettered. Fortunately, they only opened Taia plus Vishuda, which is a combo line, but it's definitely one of the, like, quote-unquote weaker ones, as you only really end on Chi Xiao plus Baron, and you don't get the extra draw off of Mo Ye, so there is that at the very least. They send another Vishuda here. Or I guess just another Vishuda. And they do have the Longyuan, or they search the Longyuan rather. Or did they search the Taia? They already have the... It seemed like, hang on. Come on, let's scroll up. Here we go. Oh no, they did that, the Longyuan, okay. So they just opened Vishuda and then multiple Taias, so... And of course, we draw Nibiru right on time, so I'm going to lead with my own Longyuan. And then, of course, they have Maxx. We do have the call by, though, so that's always nice, although they have the Baron, so the call by is pretty much only going to draw out the Omni Negate here. But yeah, I decided to lead with Longyuan to, of course, try to get the Baron online as quickly as possible. Against not only the things they have on board, but also any potential, like, hand traps or stuff in hand, which is definitely going to be a very relevant thing to be thinking about now that we're under Maxx. At this point, though, because we're going second, and our opponent's already got such a well-established ward up, I don't really have the option to just pass through Maxx like I like to do most of the time, right? Given the option, I will tend to just pass through Maxx. Also, I really should have led by especially Adhara. I think that was a pretty big misplay on my part, because I definitely would have had a lot more options as far as the lines I could have gone into had I summoned the Adhara here. But we're going to have to push this Maxx and just play through it, right? We don't really have much of a choice here, so... using the Taia to summon the Swordsoul token. I don't know why, my nose is really itchy as I'm talking, and it's only when I talk. Huh, I wonder if it's my glasses or something? I don't know, sorry if that's... So if you hear me scratching my nose a lot, sorry about that, but yeah, so we'll go for the Baxia here in order to put our opponent's stuff back, and then we can also use Baxia, pop itself, and get back the Mo Ye we sent at the Taia, and then we can continue our combos that way. So revealing the, I guess it's good that we didn't summon the Adhara, because now I can reveal it for this line, but we could have also pivoted into a Hulk line had I actually summoned the Adhara, which would have been better and might have even gotten us lethal, potentially, I don't know here. Because see, the opponent does have the Ash and the Veiler here actually to stop both the draw and the search, but I don't know if those are the last 2 cards drawn or not. So I don't know if going for the Hulk line would have actually been better. It is to be expected, of course, when you're playing into a Maxx like this. Your opponent's probably going to end up drawing responses to your combo further down the line if they didn't have them already. It becomes increasingly more and more likely, but it's like, we were just 1,000 points short. Like, oh man. And the other thing too is if I had some of the Adhara, I could have gone to a Monk and had that extra 1,000. So, yeah, definitely misplayed, but not especially that Adhara. Although, could I have? I'm trying to think back to like how that turn played out at the start there. Hang on, where's the start of the turn? Okay, here we go. Yeah, no, I totally could have specialed Adhara first. I definitely should have done that. I would have had lethal if I had. Shoot. Oh, man. Yeah, I kind of figured that was the case, but, whatever. You know, you live and you learn. There's always the next game, too. Then, I don't know why. I didn't know that I think about it. I think I was just so focused on getting the Longyuan out ASAP. It was just, I just tunnel visioned. I kind of have that problem. It's almost not the opposite maybe, but the inverse. I don't know which it would be of like ADHD, because I definitely don't have that. But like sometimes I get too tunnel brained or tunnel visioned in an idea. That's the only thing I focus on, and I shut out all other things. And in this case, I kind of end up shutting out just summoning Adhara because I was so focused on getting the Baron out as quickly as possible. So I don't know. I guess that's my excuse, so to speak. But we do still have the Nibiru, so we're not out of this game by any means. Definitely not. At this point, I'm just going to kind of wait until my opponent is setting up, you know, something that could lead to a negate or is about to move into the battle phase, which they end the main phase here. So that's when I go ahead and use the Nibiru. They've got their own Maxx, which is going to let them get a couple of draws off the Nibiru, but it is what it is, you know. We obviously still have to do this in order to not die. And since I have the Adhara in hand, I do have the possibility now of potentially pivoting into the Hulk line. Opponent does set a couple of back rows though, and this is going to present a challenge here, right? Because basically, I know that their Blackout isn't live, but the opponent could still have either Imperm or Call By are like the two most likely things for them to have here that could potentially mess me up. I'm thinking it's decently likely that it's Call By because they set and destroyed their own Call By last turn. So I think they would be very likely to do that if they had an extra copy already in hand. The thing is, though, if we summon Adhara, then we still can't, what is it? Because what I wanted to do, right, let me back up a little bit. I'm thinking, okay, they're at 1,000. If I can just get a Longyuan effect off, I can just trigger this Longyuan's effect, then I can win just by doing that and nothing else, right? So like, okay, I can use this Adhara, go into a Hulk line. Even if they stop the Hulk line, I can banish the Adhara and wheel the Longyuan back. Right? Wrong. Because, or no, not the Hulk line. I'd have to summon Adhara, go into Monk, and then banish and get the Longyuan back. But I can't actually pitch Ecclesia for Longyuan because it's neither a Swordsoul nor a Worm card. So I have to summon Ecclesia here and try to set up Longyuan kind of the roundabout way. And then they end up having an Ash anyway. So, I guess even if I tried to go for the Hulk, they would have the Ash for the Hulk effect, so I still wouldn't have been able to really go off at all, pretty much regardless. So, funnily enough, it did not end up being either of the back rows, but an in-hand Ash that ends up stopping me there. So, yeah, they have the Nibiru at over 8,000 attack, so pretty easy for them to just summon something right over my Nibiru and then just smack me for game. So, that is a game where we had a decent back and forth, and I did unfortunately miss lethal by not summoning that Adhara. Still kicking myself for that, but it happens. It is what it is, like I said. So, alright, let's go ahead and move on now to the outro. Okay, everybody, hope you enjoyed those games from the first night of the season here. Yeah, like I said, we ended up bullying a lot of like off-meta decks, but then with that last game, I guess Karma kind of came around and we ended up misplaying and got bullied by a mirror match as a result. So, it is what it is, you know. You live and you learn, and it's just like the ebb and flow of any game, like Master Duel, like any digital card game, right? You win some, you lose some, and you just can't let yourself get too hung up or beat yourself up too much over the losses. Just like learn from them and then move on. So like, you know, my takeaway from that loss is just to not try to get so tunnel visioned when thinking about doing a certain play, and consider doing all the optimal stuff before leading up to that play. But yeah, that's about all I've got to say for this one. I want to thank you as always for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That is very, very helpful. Also very appreciative to those of you who are commenting and subscribing. Those and watching to the end are all excellent ways to support the channel, and I love hearing from you guys in the comments, as you guys offer some very good feedback and advice about deck building, gameplay, stuff you'd like to see, all that stuff in general. I just consider your input to be very, very valuable, so thank you very much for chiming in. I'd love to hear it from you. But that's all I've got for this one. Without further ado, this is XLex, signing out. Hope you guys have a fantastic day.